The wind had been restless all day, tugging at the edges of Jedediah Hayes's worn hat and whistling through the gaps in the wooden fences that kept his cattle corralled. He stood on the ridge overlooking his property, squinting against the low sun that set the horizon ablaze with shades of red and gold. The land was quiet, almost unnervingly so, except for the occasional lowing of cattle and the faint rustle of dry grass under the weight of the evening breeze. For decades, this land had been his world, a sanctuary he had carved from the untamed expanse of the West, and he guarded it with a stubbornness that few outsiders could understand. To him, it wasn't just property, it was survival, it was history, it was the sweat and blood of generations that came before him. Jedediah sighed, his broad shoulders sagging slightly beneath the weight of his leather duster. It had been another long day, checking fences, moving cattle, fixing the water trough that had sprung a leak during the midday heat. He wiped the sweat from his brow with the back of a calloused hand and turned toward the small cabin that served as both home and refuge. Inside, the warm smell of wood smoke and stewing beans would be waiting, a promise of simple comfort after hours of solitude. That promise was shattered before he even reached the door. A distant sound caught his ear, a frantic, uneven rhythm, the pounding of hooves across the dirt road that led from the main trail to his ranch. It was erratic, desperate, unlike any rider he had seen. Jedediah froze, his hand instinctively resting on the butt of the revolver at his hip. He knew the difference between a rider passing by and a rider fleeing something, or someone. From the ridge, he saw a figure emerge, kicking up a cloud of dust. The horse was lean, the rider hunched low, clinging to the reins with a white-knuckled grip. As they approached, Jedediah noticed the rider was disheveled, clothes torn and stained, and the horse itself was covered in sweat and lather. His instinct screamed that this was no ordinary traveler, no weary ranch hand or merchant. The rider skidded to a stop at the edge of the corral, throwing himself from the saddle and collapsing in the dirt. Jedediah descended the ridge slowly, careful not to startle the man further. As he drew nearer, the man's desperation became palpable. He was trembling violently, his eyes wide and darting as if shadows themselves were pursuing him. He clutched something to his chest, a bundle wrapped in oilcloth, and gasped out words between ragged breaths. "Please, just do it now," he pleaded, voice raw and trembling. Jedediah's eyebrows knit together. He took a cautious step closer, his hand never leaving his revolver. "Now, what's happening? Who's after you?" The stranger shook his head violently. "No time, can't explain. They're coming, they'll kill me, kill anyone who sees it. Just, you have to do it." His fingers fumbled with the bundle, almost dropping it before Jedediah caught it. It was a letter, thick and heavy, with the official stamp of the territorial government smudged across the corner. Jedediah's fingers brushed against the paper, and he could feel the weight of urgency, the gravity of its contents. He knew, instinctively, that this was more than a message, it was evidence, a spark that could ignite a powder keg. "Who are they? What's in this letter?" Jedediah demanded, his voice low and controlled, though his heart hammered in his chest. He had faced trouble before, outlaws, rustlers, and even corrupt sheriffs, but this felt different. The fear radiating from the stranger was not that of a man running from common lawbreakers, it was raw, primal terror. The stranger shook his head again, tears glinting in the dying sunlight. "You don't understand, if they get this, it'll be the end, for me, for them, for everyone. Please, I can't, you have to, just do it now." Jedediah felt a chill crawl up his spine. He had always prided himself on being decisive, on knowing when to act and when to hold back. But this was something else entirely. The choice before him was not just about survival, it was about morality, about stepping into a conflict that could destroy everything he had built. He glanced around the ranch, taking in the fences, the cattle, the cabin that had sheltered him through countless storms. To act would mean bringing violence to his doorstep, inviting enemies into the life he had fought so hard to preserve. To hesitate could mean letting injustice go unchecked, letting innocent lives be crushed under the weight of greed and corruption. Jedediah's eyes met the stranger's, searching for any hint of deceit. But there was none, only desperation, only trust placed in a man who had no reason to offer it. He swallowed hard, his throat dry. "All right," he said finally, his voice steady but firm. "I'll help. But you have to tell me everything. Who's coming, what's in the letter, and why you can't go to the authorities." The stranger let out a shaky breath, relief washing over him like a wave. I can't. They've spies everywhere. Even the sheriff. No. You can't trust anyone. Just, take it, hide it, and do what has to be done. Please, I'm begging you. Jedediah weighed the bundle in his hands. The paper inside could be a death sentence or a chance to bring justice where there was none. He could see it in the stranger's eyes. This was a choice that had been forced upon him, and it was a choice that could not be undone. He glanced again at the horizon, the sun bleeding red into the sky, casting long shadows across the land. He thought of his own life, the peace he had fought for, and the possibility of losing it all in a single night. Yet, as he looked back at the man, he felt the stirrings of a resolve he hadn't felt in years, a sense that sometimes, doing the right thing meant risking everything. Come inside, Jedediah said finally. We'll figure it out. But you've got to tell me exactly what's going on, or we're both as good as dead. The stranger nodded, his relief evident in the trembling of his hands. Together, they moved toward the cabin, the horse trailing behind, its sides heaving. Jedediah kept his eyes on the surrounding plains, ever vigilant, every instinct screaming that danger was closer than the distance suggested. Inside the cabin, the stranger collapsed into a chair, hands shaking, eyes wide with fear. Jedediah placed the letter carefully on the table, brushing a hand over it as if its mere presence could absorb the urgency and terror contained within. I need to know everything, Jedediah said. No lies, no omissions. If we're going to do this, we do it right. The stranger nodded, swallowing hard, his voice barely a whisper. It's about the land, the cattle, corruption at the highest levels. Powerful men, ruthless. They'll kill anyone who stands in their way. Jedediah leaned back in his chair, taking a deep breath. He had faced down many threats before, but never like this. The West was a land of lawlessness, of survival, of choices that could haunt a man for a lifetime. And now, standing in his cabin with a stranger whose life depended on him, Jedediah understood that he had been thrust into one of those moments. He looked down at the letter again, feeling the weight of it press against his palm. The words inside could ignite a war, destroy empires, or deliver justice where none had existed. And he, Jedediah Hayes, had the power to decide its fate. He knew the risk. He knew the consequences. And yet, as he gazed into the stranger's terrified eyes, he realized that some choices were not about convenience, or safety, or self-preservation. Some choices were about doing what had to be done, even if it meant living with the shadow of that decision for the rest of one's life. Jedediah's hand rested on the letter, and for the first time in years, he felt the full weight of responsibility, not just for himself, but for a stranger, for justice, and for the land that had made him who he was. The wind outside howled through the gaps in the cabin, carrying with it the dust and danger of the plains, and in that moment, Jedediah Hayes made a decision that would haunt him forever.